Should be good.
Cool. So, Matt, do you want to lead us off and talk about where we're going?
Sure. So we're doing a little bit of a test here for a podcast we're working through right now. We kind of want to get the flow going and see what happens with this. So our current discussion was going to be on what each one of our preferences is for rolling characters. And there's a number of different ways to do this. Some homebrew, some are straight out of the book. And Eric here is really the only one with DM experience at this point, but so he can kind of give us his perspective on it. But Jeff and I obviously come from a multitude of different things, and we wanted to talk about which parts of this we think are cool, and I think we'll both probably eventually end up DMing campaigns with our group as well, and which one we probably prefer and for what situation we think that makes sense. So Eric, you got the most experience with this. You want to lead off with what the methods are, and we can just kind of bounce them back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just go over quickly what the main methods are for rolling your stats. So a big one that was popular in original D&D was roll 3d6, add up the numbers, and that's what that stat is. Since then, it is more changed to leading to higher numbers, and that you roll 4d6, drop the lowest number, and add those up, and that becomes your stat. And you keep a pool of those, and you assign them as you see fit. However, that leads to a lot of variance in numbers. So you can have really highs, you can have really lows. So a lot of people might like to go to a point-buy system where you start at a number and you have to buy your points. So you start, at 8, and then you can buy points. So to buy to 9, it's 1. To buy to 10, it's 2 points. And there's a good visual of it right there. So the highest thing that you could actually buy to would be a 15. And that gives you a good range between 8 and 15 based on your 27 points that you have to actually buy. Then there's also the standard distribution method, which you get a 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and an 8, and you assign them as you see fit. And I don't know if this is something that I came up with or if it's been done before, but I thought of an interesting method of what I'm calling a drop stat. I enjoy having a low stat to roleplay. So it's very similar to the 4 dice drop lowest, except instead of just throwing that number out, you keep it in a pool, and you take those 5, you do that 5 times, you take the 5 dice that are left over, add them together, and that becomes your last stat. I ran the statistics. The average on that is around a 7.9 for that last stat.
Repeating, of course.
But I've seen it as low as 6 and as high as 14. So it can be all over the place. But I think it leads to a more interesting character creation. But let's just, let's go over 3d6 versus 4d6 drop lowest. I think that's one of the biggest changes in recent iterations, and I think that's something that it is easy to compare the two. So I don't know what you guys think about those two methods.
The 3d6, I think the 46 drop lowest is really, it favors having characters that if you have bad dice rolling, it's going to give you a chance to not end up with a character that's really weak in a lot of categories. I mean, statistically, it's just giving you a better chance to not end up with, you just have one more die. I mean, anytime in any game we've ever played, whether you're talking about, it's normal board games up to like the Pathfinder ACG, and even in this case, like more dice is always giving you a better chance of better values on some of them at the very least. So for me, I like the fact, I really like the drop stat idea. I think it kind of, in some sense can, you could even morph it to say you don't have to drop the lowest die. if you want to try to make sure that your last one's going to end up as 5. However, then you're creating very bland characters that aren't going to role play because you're basically trying to average out all the results of your scores. 3d6, if you're rolling 3 ones over and over and over again, you're going to basically have to re-roll your entire character.
Right. I think the 3d6 is a way to design a brutal world. If you want it to be a tough time on your players and they have to struggle to stay alive, if you're running a Dark Souls-esque campaign, I think 3d6 is perfectly acceptable. However, in 5e, a commoner has 10 across the board. That's their stats. So the odds that you have stats lower than a commoner is actually quite high, just rolling 3d6. Whereas 4d6 drop lowest, it pushes you higher, basically. You see less 3s, 4s, 5s, 6, and you push more into the 7 to 18 range. And I think that really separates a hero adventurer from common people.
If you're looking at probabilities there, 3d6 for getting greater than or equal to a 10 is only a 62% chance. So, I mean, you're talking slightly more than half the rolls you're going to be worse than the common folk, and you're supposed to be a hero. You're supposed to be someone that stands out. So that's just petrifying to think of the fact that I could be some, guy that just can't do much of anything, and trying to make my way through and not die, basically, until we level up far enough to move those stats up to a respectable level. Meanwhile, somebody that's got hot dice is playing a superhuman in a world that may have to have the CR moved down because of the fact that you have plebes running around trying to use swords.
Yeah.
So, as far as the other ones, I think, well, I guess I kind of want to bring in the perspective of, we kind of talked about this off the stream a little bit. I think it depends on the strength of the role-playing ability of your guys coming into this, on which ones of these are going to be the natural fit. I think if you have people that are new into this, that either the standard distribution or the point buy is probably going to make the most sense, just because of the fact that you can't really have a bad stat. I mean, you can have ones that are not great, but you're not going to end up with a 4 for intellect or something like that. I mean, the worst you're going to ever have is an 8, which ends up with basically almost close to net neutral. In the fact, I mean, you're talking a -1 ability modifier, whereas 4 you're talking a -3. That can really just destroy early rolls in the game. And people that aren't strong role players may not be able to play a character that only has, say, charisma of 5 or an intellect of 4 or something like that. Myself included, I know that I'm not there yet, with this to be able to really play, UG Smash as I'm walking around here, because it's something that I'm not used to.
That's just more of IRL than actual role play, though. You got to think about that. If you're just acting like normal Matt over here, then give yourself an intelligence of like 6 and call it a day.
And a strength of like 4, charisma of 30.
Yep.
Yeah.
All of the charisma.
I like the drop stat. I agree that for you'd be cheating yourself if you allow them to pick the dice. If you're going to do that, at that point you might as well just make it a standard point distribution, because that's basically what you're setting them up for, is they can choose where they want it to be. It is interesting because you're not really going to know where you end up until the end, because that very last stat you can roll 4 6s and push yourself up to a really halfway decently balanced character, maybe not, So that would be fun for me, in the fact that I never know what I'm going to get until the very end, and then I got to sit there and go, all right, well, I either have a 5 or I have a 15 that I just happen to end up with, and I go, oh, all right, cool, it's whatever. That's not going to be that difficult.
Yeah, I think standard distribution is fine for new players. I don't like point buy for new players, and like you were saying before, it depends on role playing. It depends on experience of players. and I especially don't like point buy for newer players, because newer players don't necessarily know where they need points. A lot of newer players are going to put Constitution as their dump stat, which will get you killed. And I think that there's a lot of learning that has to be involved with point buy. Standard distribution is okay because you have most of your suggested stats for your class that you're playing, and you can kind of push stuff around so that you have a potentially strong feeling character. But I think it's pretty obvious. I think my favorite is drop stat. The whole game is based around a character doing something, a difficulty being set, and then in letting the dice lay where they might, and I think that if you've got so much predicated on rolling dice and building your character in that way, I think that rolling dice to determine how your character is also a great way to do it. And the reason I like drop stat is because it generally yields low stats. And I really enjoy opportunities for role play. I know that for players it can be intimidating because if you are that player that gets the 5 intelligence, how are you going to play that character? What are you going to 5? I don't even think that you can read at 5. I think 6 intelligence is the minimum for being able to read. So you'll be able to communicate, you just won't be able to read anything. And how do you play a character that isn't even intelligent enough to read? It makes it difficult. But I think it also leads to fantastic moments.
It can also lead to like the worst moments ever, to be honest. I mean, like it all depends. It all depends on the group. I mean, I think the ability score, like like putting out the point values and everything like that. Like, I don't know if you said it was good or not for newer players. I think it's great for new players.
Standard distribution. I think so.
Yeah, because I mean, it really just gives you that gateway to learn how to be creative, and because it gives you the ability to do almost everything. Maybe nothing's as good as others, but it gives you the ability to try everything, which is good. Even if it's a -1 to something, you can still overcome that. It's it's not, you don't have to be too creative to do that, but it gives you that gateway into the game to be more creative.
And I agree with that. I think that like you said, standard distribution is great for new players. The worst that you're going to have to overcome is a -1 ability modifier.
Mm-hmm.
I like the point buy, and I think it's because I have it in my head that when characters are created for the first time that I DM, I want to spend some time with those people discussing what they've done. And point buy, unlike a dice roll, not to exclude just the standard distribution, but the point buy gives you the ability to say, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I was thinking about building. And even if they're brand new, if the DM has even some experience to say kind of where they need to be, you can give them an understanding, maybe even before they set the distribution, to say, listen, what class do you want to play? What race do you want to play? Let's go over your ability modifiers really quick, your racial ability changes, your class ability changes, and then kind of give you an understanding to say, don't dump Constitution, because that's health. Like, and people probably don't understand. If you haven't played D&D before or you haven't read about it, you're not going to maybe understand that Constitution is equal to survivability almost in some cases, and the fact that then when they said they were going to put an 8 there, they go, you know what? I think that's at least got to be a 10. I'm playing a wizard. I'm not super crazy thinking I'm going to be out in the middle of things, but I also don't want to be rolling negatives on that on the off chance that I am, kind of deal. But I really want to make sure that like my intellect or whatnot is up to give me that advantage. So I think you're right. For brand new players, if you're going into a blind and just say create your characters and we're going to go, point buy is going to be bad because they're going to say, I need all strength and I'm going to try and get 30 strength, even though that's not allowed to be bought. And everything else sucks because I don't need to be good at intellect, and that's not how this game works. You have to be able to do a little bit of everything if you want to really be able to help the party succeed.
And I agree with that sentiment to an extent. I think that the smaller the party is, the more standard distributed you want your stats to be. DMing for a group of 6, well, certain characters will be able to fill in those gaps, which, that's what I'm DMing for right now. I'm DMing for a group of 6 and a group of 5. So a group of 6, I wouldn't feel bad if someone had a low score somewhere, because another character is going to have a higher score in that area, and they can kind of carry the deficiencies of the team. But that could also be a crutch, as for a DM to think, well, even if one character isn't doing so well in this area, someone can just pick up for him. But chances are you're going to split the party, you're going to do your own thing, and something interesting is going to happen, where some that I couldn't have predicted.
Yeah, there's times in our game where, like in our current game where we're playing right now, is we have this party of 6, and we come up to questions like, well, who's the best at doing this, and but since that we all have pretty standard distribution of our points, nobody's really bad at it. I mean, some people are a little bit better. I mean, but in terms of success, it's hard. It's like, well, you could do it anyways because you're pretty much very close to where I am at and where everyone else is at for the most part. I feel like we come into that roadblock to where it really doesn't matter. It does matter to a point, but it really doesn't really matter who checks that certain check, because I feel like everyone's very close to the same, I guess. And it comes to charisma, I guess we haven't run into too many different situations, I guess. But when it comes to, we haven't had to utilize charisma and things like that yet. So I just feel like, it sucks you when you want a +3 instead of a -1. But I feel like when it comes to, Constitution, the way our people are built, everyone's at, a, +2 to +1, maybe a +0. I'm not sure. I haven't seen the other character sheets. But either way, I just feel like it hasn't come into effect to where that guy really shouldn't do that check, at least from what I've seen.
I think that's true. So far we haven't really had an area where someone definitely shouldn't do something, other than when our wizards try to get up in melee combat. Maybe not the best decision.
True.
But
Zach.
But those things do happen, and it's a learning process for newer players, for sure. And then that's another thing too, is, and this is sort of off topic, but it was brought up, of the who should do this is kind of happening based off stats, which I feel like from a DM perspective, that's always going to happen. Stats kind of clarify what type of character, how people see you, but at the same time, you don't want your characters talking about, well, hey, you're the most charismatic, why don't you go deal with the merchant and try to haggle a price. That should come from the character, even and that's the thing, if you've got a character that really, really wants to haggle with the merchant and they have a -2 charisma, to me that's an interesting situation. It's a conflict of character stats with mentality of the character. And maybe those two things are in opposition, that maybe a character with low charisma wouldn't think they had the ability to haggle, unless something happens that makes them want to haggle. So, and as you can see, it's very, from my point, it's role-playing coming organically from these stats and how it flows.
I think that's going to change too as we get more comfortable with our characters and more comfortable with playing, because I think right now everybody's kind of unsure what they should be doing in general, and I think that there's going to be a lot more volunteering to do things because there's a better understanding of what should be happening in that situation than, hey, we're at a river, we need to cross it. Who's going to be the best at walking across? And then we'll throw the rope and everyone else kind of climb kind of deal, where somebody will sort of establish themselves as the big burly dude that does all the muscly stuff for the most part. And to Eric's point, there will be instances where the halfling wants to be the one to go first. and that'll just be awesome for all of us to watch them just get swept downstream and disappear forever, because that's just something that shouldn't normally happen. But I think right now it's kind of like, I'm not even sure if my character can do this, and so we are doing a little bit of min-maxing to say, I probably shouldn't be doing it. So somebody else that might have a +2 instead of a +1, you have a better chance. But there's nothing that says that a guy with a -2 can't crit, and they hit it, So and the guy with the +3, rolls a 1, So it's right now. I think there's the party cohesion will come together to where we have a guy that just naturally goes and sneaks up front every time, and we have a guy that's the one that generally just carries the torch because they don't need their free hand for whatever else while the rest of us do. And and maybe not, but I just get that feeling that that's going to come through weeks of doing this.
I think that'll be the case. I think that as we play, people will fall into their role, and instead of thinking about their stats, will think about, my character's strong, I got this. Or, they'll be bullheaded, or they'll have a goal in mind and just try to take charge and go for it. Even if they might not have the best stats for the job, it's just that's what they're doing and no one's going to stop them.
Yeah, I think the way we all as players, most of us started as players, being never played even D&D before, is that we're trying to figure out how to play the game, not how to play our characters. And we didn't figure that out and we didn't even start thinking about it until maybe halfway through our first session, to where we're like, oh, I have this character, I need to figure out what he's doing, why is he doing it, even though we've had pre-made sheets from the starter set and listed things like that. But nobody, even if they read it, I know I didn't really put that much effort into trying to build the character before I was in my character's shoes, which you need a little bit of substance before you start, not too much. You're gonna figure it out as you play for the most part. But I had no idea going in, what kind of even direction that I wanted my character to go, and I'm sure a lot of the other people in this game, in our party, felt the same way.
Yeah, and I think that DMing for a group that has not played RPGs before to a big extent and are more board gamers, there is the the temptation more to min-max and not actually role play and just play stats.
Yeah.
And I think that some systems for stat distribution lend more towards just trying to play stats, and that's not saying that playing stats is a bad thing. There are certainly times where you just need to say, okay, well, I am a fighter, I need strength, and I think that almost has to happen. But I think there's also a little bit in there where your wizard and your wizard, ours in particular, may want to arm wrestle one of the stronger characters, and that's just going to happen, and it's great when it does, and if he wins, I feel bad for whoever he beats.
It's true. So in this situation, step out of the shoes you're in for a minute. Jeff, say you go DM. Eric, say you go player.
Yeah.
You're in your first adventure together. Jeff is DMing Eric and my campaign. Which point distribution would you prefer now in the other role, and what is that? And I guess Jeff, go first because you would be leading this thing. What would you prefer to put us through point wise? To give the kind of adventure that you're looking to run. Do you want those odds and ends of the rolls, or do you want it to be more uniform?
2d6.
Yeah, no, I like the point system. I like what is it, 20 or 27? I like the standard point system, and distribute how you want. I think if I'm running a larger group, I think it's better, because I think it'll cause more variation. There's different types of players. Some people are going to want to be super strong, super weak in certain aspects. Someone's going to want to be middle ground, just kind of good at everything kind of aspect. I think that's what I would do. I mean, yeah, I think that's what I would do.
Well, I'm not going to hold you to that. I was just interested to see, point blank first discussion, because I mean, Eric's going to be doing the same thing. What do you think right now? And maybe we can revisit this down the line and say, after you've DM'd, after you've played with our group, do you still agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, I would prefer drop stat. I think from both sides of the table, I like that method. And I think that's me coming from a completely not min-max kind of character, but that also would be in a world that's high magic. I think in a low magic world, I think that point distribution might be better just because you don't have the opportunity to make up for your deficiencies as much. But as a player, I like rolling the dice and saying, okay, well that happened. That's where I'm gonna be. If I end up with 3 stats below 10, that sucks for my character. But at the same time, it really pushes me in a path. And I think that's an interesting way to play the game.
I feel like if I was gonna roll my stats, like we're all playing remotely, so we're all in different locations, and I'm sitting there and I'm rolling my stats, and I just nut every roll, like it's just on point, and then like I come back and be like, this is my character, people would be like, bullshit. Like there's no way, get the fuck out of here, make another character right now, and I'll be like, that's what I rolled, and like I feel like it could cause issues.
There's 2 points to that. If I'm DMing campaign, I'm going to make you roll when we're all in a group, and I'm going to make you roll on your camera. And not because I want to penalize you, but because I want you to be rewarded if your dice are hot that night. If you roll God character and hit 18s, you get 18s, and I, the DM, and nobody in this party can argue with it because they all saw it happen.
Right.
But you're right.
And I agree with that completely. I think if you are going to roll stats, then you have to sit down, session 0, everybody gets together, or you just point your cameras down, you roll, say, okay, this is my number, and then you just go in a circle, and everybody says, this is the number I got, and you just keep doing that, and then you say, okay, well, here's how I'm going to distribute them. And I think that's important. But now that I think about it, there's also another way, if we can throw it in here. I know that we're getting to the end, and that is a very similar way, but drafting, a draft method. So it's the same thing, 4d6, drop the lowest, but then it just becomes a pool in the middle of the table, and you go in order, and you draft the numbers, and then you go back.
So
how do you guys feel about that?
Wouldn't it just be everyone takes the next highest number?
It might, but but think about it this way: the people in the middle have more normalized stats, and the people on the ends have highs and lows, right?
Sure.
If you're saying everybody just takes the next highest number,
yeah.
But maybe you don't want to create deficiencies on the team, so maybe you wouldn't take the next highest number every single time, because if one portion of the team is weaker, then that brings down the entire team.
Yeah.
But you will have the selfish min-max person that's just like highest number.
You'd have to have a really, in my opinion, cohesive group that has adventured together before, that really doesn't want to be carrying somebody. Whereas if you get a bunch of guys that may be used to playing a lot of competitive board games or competitive gaming or whatever, they are going to try to leave people behind and pull sixes all day long.
So what you're saying is, if we do this method, then Eric's DM then, and we can't have him part of the party, is what we're saying.
Well, I have an interesting thing that I came across on Reddit a couple days ago. 3d6, you re-roll 1s and 2s.
Yeah, I've seen that.
So where, or just the first one?
I've seen it both ways. You literally will re-roll until it's not a 1 or a 2, or you re-roll it once. Most people seem to agree it's either once or twice. And the point of that was, if you're trying to design an adventure that's got maybe a higher CR feel to it, a lot more magic, more difficult things, you don't want to be killing characters off because they have deficiencies, especially if you have a very small party, you're DMing for 2-3 people, and you really need people to not have 8s, then it kind of artificially boosts the characters. Maybe they feel like God for a little while, but you will adjust the encounters to suit the fact that they don't really have problems with a whole lot. Now, that really comes from a DMing style, whether or not you really want to push, them being able to min-max anything, or you want, just something I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, that is interesting. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it, just from my standpoint of how I like to DM. For a vast majority, you design your encounter around your party. Not every encounter has to be challenging. Not every encounter has to be a knockout, drag-out fight. Some can be quick and painless. Some can be long and drawn out. Some can have reinforcements. And you kind of build around your party because, that's what the DM's there for. My fun comes from your fun. So, if we get to playing and I realize you guys like those longer, drag-out fights, a character goes unconscious, you have to scramble. How do you keep them up? How do you continue to deal with the enemies? If you guys like that, then I can design around that, and I know your stats, so I know right about where you're sitting, and I can just say, okay, this encounter will do this thing for the group. If you guys like more, less risk, you'll also probably get less reward from a less risk campaign, but it will never feel like there's intense, immediate danger. And I don't know that necessarily has to come from the stats, though. But I think DM philosophy plays a lot into the kind of stat that you like to do. How you like to distribute stats.
It also gives you the ability, if you're going to run it that way, especially with a small party where people don't have to be perfect. You can make mistakes. You can have bad rolls. Yep. And it might cushion the blow a little bit. I had an interesting thought at one point to DM an adventure, small party, guys like the two of you that I know have a lot of competitive gaming experience, have a lot of, whether you're talking trading card games, video games, all that kind of stuff. You have that kind of, I'd call it like alpha personality for that kind of thing, to say, I want you to reroll 1s and 2s. I want you to have high stats because I'm going to push your party to its breaking point. I don't want to give you weak encounters because you should be able to handle anything, and I'm going to give you that cushion, and let's see what happens. Maybe you make it almost like a dungeon crawl, like kind of like a put your luck kind of dungeon crawl. Like, how far do you want to go? Because you are good. You are above average. But I'm not going to leave it to where you're fighting one goblin where you're just like, I throw my sword at him, I'll get it later. Like there's, you're talking multiple dragons and things like that to where it's going to be rough, but you have the ability to handle it. And it's just a different feel. It's a different DMing feel. And that's not how I'd probably run a normal adventure. But if we get, bored with the normal adventure, or we want to try a little one-off here that's a little crazy, then it gives a little variety.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is all about the feel. Do you want characters to feel incredibly powerful? Do you want them to feel like, hey, you were some average guy, you had you were a guard though, so you were trained, but you're not, a superhuman, and you decided you wanted to go on an adventure. It's kind of it sets the groundwork for how your adventure is going to play going forward.
All right. Any finishing thoughts on this, or want to wrap this one up and set up for? We got an adventure coming up next Monday. Should be streaming about 7 to 10 o'clock Central, and then we'll be back at this with probably a more formal lineup after we tweak some things. Tuesday nights. I think we're thinking starting probably 7:38, something like that. And if anybody's seen this, thanks for watching. If not, it was a great run through, guys, and I'm excited for next week.
Agreed. As far as final thoughts go, I think that any way you decide as a DM to do your stat distribution, whether that be rolling for stats, point by, drafting, drop stat. You want to okay it with your players. Let them know what you expect from a campaign, and then see what they like the most. Some people are going to like to have the control of a point buy system. Other people are going to enjoy the randomness and the role play aspects of a drop stat or a 3d6 kind of method. And it's feel the group out, find out what they like, what kind of adventure they expect, and then cater a system to them.
And don't forget, no matter what you choose, you can always roll ones.
Yep.